All right, let's talk some more about subsistence agriculture. Right, there are different types of agriculture that you see primarily used with regard to subsistence agriculture. Right, one of them we've talked quite a bit about is shifting cultivation. Right, shifting cultivation means that you've used this piece of property, this land, as much as you can use it. There are no nutrients left, so you shift to another field. All right, it often takes place in tropical areas. But I think if you guys remember back to one of the questions we had, it's very prominent in sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is not a tropical climate, right? It often occurs in places where you have poor farmers who can't afford all the fancy schmancy, pesticides and fertilizers that, can be used to replenish the nutrients. So you often see it in places like sub-Saharan Africa as well. All right, one of the types of shifting cultivation that we've talked about is slash and burn, right, where you go in and just slash away at all the vegetation and burn off the rest that's there. Burning those off, right, puts some nutrients back into the soil. Some of the ways that farmers can help prevent nutrients from being leached out of the soil is to rotate crops, right? Different crops use different nutrients, so you give the land some time to rest. If you plant, one crop in an area this year and plant another crop in that same area the next year. You may also try to leave areas fallow to not plant and let the soil kind of rejuvenate for a while. For subsistence farmers, that's not really an option because they don't have the option of just leaving a place non-planted. They need to have that money or that food from that as well. Irrigation can be an issue as well. Irrigation has issues of it certainly helps and brings water, but irrigated water tends to be heavier in salt, and so it will salinate the soil. And over time, that soil becomes a problem as well. All right. Another type of subsistence agriculture that you still see in some areas is pastoral farming, right, dealing with animals, right? Moving animals on a seasonal basis. So some form of nomadism as they still move places around, right? We also call that transhumance, where you move animals from the winter grounds to the summer grounds and then back again. We don't see a lot of it on that in many places in the core, right? Because we have large animal ranching and what have you in other places, or we can provide them, and bring them the food that they need. So you will see this in more of the peripheral areas where subsistence agriculture is still practiced. Another type of agriculture in this area that we really didn't talk about too much is what they call intensive subsistence agriculture, right? It's intense, right? You have to work twice as hard to get the same product that you used to. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about Uzbekistan being a cotton producing country when it was under the control of the Soviet Union. It leached the soil of nutrients, yet the current Uzbek government, which is very corrupt, is wanting farmers to produce the same amount as they did many years ago under the Soviet Union back in the 80s and 90s. The water has been depleted, the soil's been depleted, and so there's much more intensive efforts to try and produce those particular types of farming. All right, let's move on to commercial farming. All right, commercial farming is what you see in a lot of places. You'll see this in core and periphery, but know that it's mostly controlled by core, right? It's either in the core lands or it's controlled by a core corporation. It's the second most dominant type of farming that you'll find in the world. It is mass production of some crop, right? Huge farms, huge machinery, lots of pesticides and fertilizers, We talked about those Monsanto seeds that only will respond to Roundup, right? So they have to not only buy the seeds, but they have to buy the Roundup or the pesticide that triggers, that pest resistance in the seeds. And then Monsanto goes and changes the seeds every year so that you cannot reuse the seeds. And so you have to buy new seeds and new pesticides, which is why it's cost prohibitive for many farmers. You see a lot of commercial farming in on plantation farms, huge farms with one single crop. And then you'll find those all over the world. And again, go to Kenya, like we looked at for their tea and coffee plantations. Those are probably owned by foreign corporations. So very little goes to wages. Most of it goes out of the country to those foreign corporations. Most of the people doing the work, women and children. Right? So there's another area where you can bring gender inequality into a free response question if you get that opportunity. Right? You also want to talk about with commercial farming is the idea of a monoculture, right? Or monocropping. I'm sorry, monocropping. Monocropping is where you only plant one crop, where you have a monoculture where the country is dependent upon that one crop. And if that one crop goes bad, right, the country can lose everything. Right? When the crops are going great, things are wonderful and the country can make money. Right? But if it's not going great, then of course you can lose money. If you guys kind of have been paying attention to the news and you look at the oil, what's going on in the oil right now, right? When oil is expensive, everybody makes money. When it's not expensive, people lose. Texas, because of the negative value of oil right now, is losing millions of dollars in tax revenue that they use to fund things like infrastructure and education in the state. So that can be a problem, not just for peripheral countries, but for larger countries as well. All right, as you look through your reading materials, you're going to see a lot of different types of agriculture that we really did not discuss that much. Again, I would be familiar with it, but I think given the nature of this year's AP test, there's not going to be a lot of time to do a lot of really minutia. So please just kind of be familiar with them. If you can throw them in there, great. But you're not going to get the type of multiple choice questions that typically will deal with these real small areas. All right, moving on. Ooh, that's right in the way, isn't it? All right, let's look at von Thunen's model. All right, you need to know who von Thunen is. You need to know what his model is. All right, and know that it still applies in some areas of the world. All right, von Thunen is kind of wanted to look at the relationship between where things happen in an agricultural village, right, in relation to the center city, right? He looked at a couple of things in particular. The cost of land, right? We know that land closest to the city is the most expensive. As you move further out, it is less expensive, right? We also know, though, that one of the greatest costs and during von Thunen's time and for a long time after, one of the greatest costs was transportation, right? So transportation costs could be prohibitive. So you would want to balance them. Balance how much did this land cost versus how much would this cost me to transport, right? And if it's the transportation costs are not so bad, right, I'm going to try to look for maybe more expensive land, right? If transportation costs become greater, I'm going to look for least expensive land, right? So you're looking at the cost of land closest to the city versus the land farthest away from the city and the cost of transportation. We also know we wanted to bring into this equation the perishability of foods, right? Von Thunen is mid-1800s. So we're not looking at refrigeration, right? Preservatives that would make food last longer. So if you have something that is going to be perishable, you might be willing to spend more money on land. So based upon that, you come up with von Thunen's model, right? The dark blue circle is the center city, right? That's where the people are. So what are you going to put that's closest to there in the most expensive land? Well, things that would be difficult to transport. Try looking at a truckload of apples. Those are expensive to transport, but they also go bad quickly. Cut meat, milk also goes bad. These are things that people are going to want to have every day, that they're going to go out and buy every single day. They're not like we shop now, like we go every week or two. They do it every day, right? So you're willing to spend the money, forego the cost of transportation, buy more expensive land, and be closer to the city. Forests are next, because what do people cook with? Wood. So wood is expensive. It's expensive to transport. It's really heavy, and you're going to use it every day. So you're going to keep that close. You're willing to forego that expensive land to allow it to grow trees so that you can use that every day. Grains and field crops need more land. And so you're going to go a little more expensive. They're not necessarily the most expensive to transport. They're bulky, right? And you're going to, have to increase your cost of transportation a little bit, but you're balancing that out with the lesser cost of land. And then finally, in the land that's probably not really good for much else, and it's farthest away from the city, you're going to have your livestock raising. Cows can walk into the city to be butchered, right? So you're not going to worry too much about transportation costs, but boy, you're saving money on land, right? And if you look at the United States, von Thunen's model still plays out, right? A lot of your fresh fruits and vegetables and your dairy industries are located near large cities. As you move out to land that is less expensive, you're going to see more grains. And then even the land that's really not good for anything for farming, that's inexpensive, is where you're going to put your ranches and your cattle. So von Thunen's model is still fairly applicative, even though it's not, we don't transport by cart and buggy anymore. And additionally, the costs of transportation right now have gone down dramatically. So, we don't have to worry so much about the costs as well. All right. There's a lot more information regarding von Thunen in the reading material. So please, if you would, spend a little more time on that and read that as well. All right. That's the end for this one. You've got your quiz to do as well. So please study first, then take the quiz.